ABC Listen. Podcasts, radio, news, music and more.
Well, springtime, good time to have a wedding, I guess. How many people in Australia actually cement their relationship these days by getting married, though? Is it still as popular? We're going to track the history of marriage in Australia, how the demographics of marriage age have changed, and indeed how our choices about the ritual of marriage are changing too. For example, in 1902, 97% of Australians had a religious ceremony when they got married, but now that figure's at 19%. This is according to the ABS. 71% of couples are choosing to get married in a park, in a restaurant, at the beach, or just at the registry. And with the extraordinary cultural diversity of Australia's population as well, there are a range of different traditions that have come to the party too. Not to forget, of course, the legalisation of same-sex marriage in 2017. Our same-sex friends now walking down the aisle as well. What about the era of the big wedding? Is that over? Gee, with the cost of things these days and the cost of living, I think some people are probably certainly opting to save money and gather around the kitchen table with a slice of watermelon each, I imagine. Marriage and weddings and all things nuptial in 2023, taking your calls. Joining us, first up, Elisabeth Shaw is a clinical psychologist from Relationships Australia. Elizabeth, good evening to you.
Good evening, Philip.
Amy Parfett is the co-founder of WedShed. It's an online wedding service provider. Amy, good evening to you. Welcome to Nightlife.
Thanks so much, Philip.
And also joining us, a Melbourne-based Marriage Celebrant, Bronte Price. Bronte, g'day and welcome to Nightlife.
Hi, Philip. Thanks for having me.
Great to have all of you with us. Look, we wanted to take a look at who's getting married in Australia and how, but we should ask a lighter question first. What's the best wedding you've ever been to and why?
I really think I have to say it was our own wedding. So 4.5 years ago, I married my husband, and it was in an absinthe bar in Fitzroy in Melbourne. And we had around 40 of our nearest and dearest people there. We had a friend introduce the ceremony as a drag performer, and we had a grazing table and drinks for an hour and a half before the ceremony, and then the same thing after. It was the best day of our lives. It was just everything we ever wanted, really.
Very good.
ABC Radio. You're listening to Nightlife.
Nightlife with Philip Clark.
Yes, indeed. We're talking about modern marriage. Elisabeth Shaw is with us from Relationships Australia, Amy Parfett from WedShed, and Bronte Price too, Melbourne-based Marriage Celebrant. Sorry, Elizabeth, we're just bringing in and welcoming back people who were off listening to cricket and other matters. Welcoming them back to Nightlife. All right, look, can we bring Bronte? Can we bring you back in here? Bronte's a Melbourne-based wedding celebrant. The number of celebrants in Australia has gone through the roof too, Bronte. I mean, you're not alone, are you?
No, it's a pretty crowded space, Philip. So there's somewhere around 10,000 celebrants, authorised celebrants in Australia, and there are people who become celebrants just to marry a son or a daughter of theirs, and that's pretty much it. But there are others who certainly make careers out of it.
Is it hard to become one?
Sorry?
Is it hard to become one?
It's you have to do a course that would typically last for around 12 months. Then you have to apply to the Federal Attorney General's Department to be registered, which is a process that's quite involved and takes around 3 months. And if you get through that, then you eventually get this email from the Attorney General's Department saying congratulations. So then you're on your way.
What is it for you, Bronte? Is it a career thing? I mean, a job thing, or is it just something you do for friends and others?
No, it's a job. So I was a senior public servant at the same time that I became a celebrant, and I eventually had had enough of public servant life, and so after 18 months of being a celebrant, I became full-time. Mm-hmm. And I just find it so much, there's so much joy in marrying people who reach out to you and who are part of your tribe.
Yeah, I guess that's right. I mean, of all the things you can go to, weddings they do have a lot of love. President. Bronte, you have to sort of do some product differentiation here in the market, as it were. I mean, Are you a funky rock and roll celebrant, or are you a traditional? What, if you see what I mean? Do celebrants market themselves out there in terms of what's on offer?
Yeah, and I think celebrants increasingly are becoming really good at differentiating themselves from their competition. So I think
our marriages last longer.
Possibly, if they've got those data, that would be good data set they have. Yeah. So, but you go through, it's about building a business as much as it is about knowing the legal parts of celebrancy back to front kind of thing. So you really have to understand who's your really your perfect client and market towards those people. You have to have a presence on social media, have a website that's hugely optimized to attract people who are searching for someone who might be like you. So there's a lot of work in being a celebrant.
Of course, the legalisation of same-sex marriage in recent years was a big social change in Australia, a long time coming, as far as many people were concerned. Are gay people turning up for marriage in big numbers as a result of it, or maybe not so much?
If you remember back to the time, around this time of the year, back in 2017, there were these predictions that it would lead to $650 million of injection into the economy because half of gay Australia was going to get married. Half of gay couples were going to get married. And, of course, that was silly. That was never going to happen in the first year. But certainly the rates have declined since there was a pretty big influx in 2018, the year after, straight after the legislation was passed.
Yep.
And we still have, that's my market. I'm a gay celebrant. And so we still have lots of LGBTIQ plus couples, not just same-sex couples, coming in and wanting to get married. A lot of my clients come from overseas, so they live in countries where there is no marriage equality. And they come here, perhaps spend a few days.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay.
Melbourne, and go back married, and that's just.
I mean, you can do that, can you? What if you're not can you? If you're not an Australian national, you can come here and
absolutely. And so, my favourite story is I married a couple, two women from Singapore. And they flew in, say, this morning, and I married them around lunchtime. They flew home that night married. And it's just awesome.
Hang on, how are you allowed to do this, are you, even though you've got no connection with Australia?
Yes, of course.
Okay, I didn't realise that. So under the law of Australia, presume what requirements do you have to fulfil?
Well, you can come here on a visitor visa, a tourist visa, and that's, you can say, we're actually going to get married in Australia as part of the application for that. But it's just as easy as any other country. For example, if you're going to get married in New Zealand, which has got marriage equality, obviously, you'd firstly have to live there for 12 months before you could get married. Here, there's no such requirement.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. All right, so that's a market, but it hasn't been the avalanche that some have suggested. In other words, marriage is on the decline in popularity in the gay community as it is in the straight community, as it were.
Well, I think that there's been a change in the sort of expectations. So around marriage equality time, there certainly were what I would call some big gay weddings with, lots of rainbows, a 7-tiered rainbow cake, all that sort of stuff. And good on those people who had those, because that was what they wanted. What we've seen is a fundamental change, I think, in the LGBTIQ plus community. And it's certainly happening, as Elisabeth said, in the straight community too, where COVID enabled people to work out what they wanted. And it wasn't necessarily the wedding, it was the marriage. And so we get these, a lot of my weddings have the couple, myself as the celebrant and 2 witnesses.
That's it.
Or possibly 10 of their closest friends, and they'll spend a substantial amount of money on beautiful food and wine and have a celebration. But it's tiny, it's intimate, it's meaningful, and as opposed to the big events that we've heard you talk about earlier on.
Yes, indeed. Bronte Price is with us, Melbourne-based marriage celebrant. Bronte, do people still walk down the aisle in your experience?
There are a couple of wedding rituals that are very, very strong and hard to resist. One is the aisle, and the other one is the exchange of wedding rings. And I often say to couples, do you need an aisle? Why would you have an aisle? And if it's, I've dreamt of walking down the aisle with my father or my parent forever, knock yourself out, because that's really important to them. But there are other ways of using that ceremony space, perhaps walking around the outside of your guests and meeting out the front and the middle of the celebrant at the same time, or a range of other things that you could do. So the aisle is a really strong ritual, and probably always will be. As I said, the same with rings. So, and we talk about it colloquially. Are you the next one to walk down the aisle? It's not about getting married or having a wedding. It's walking down the aisle. It's part of our folklore in a way in terms of weddings.
What do you think about that, Bronte? Is that it? Is that why people are doing it?
Oh, I think there's a few reasons. I think that more and more people are seeing marriage now as a choice rather than kind of a necessity that had all sorts of pressure put on them by friends and family in the past. You go to a friend's wedding and the parents would say, oh, you must be next. I think people are also aware of the legal protections that marriage, the institution of marriage, provides you. I think people also have taken kind of the bull by the horns with this thing called marriage and have turned it into something that's really quite different from what we saw, 30 or 40 years ago. And so we have, ceremonies that are really very much reflective of them, their love, their lives. And I think also it's this thing about it's one of the biggest symbols in society of commitment. So you're making this public pledge, this public series of vows or promises in front of people who typically, are on your side and love you. And so it's this public show of that commitment that, people have known about forever, but couples just want to take it to that next step and say it out loud in front of their tribe, their people who are closest to them. I think they're the reasons that people still turn to marriage. It's a very important kind of institution, even though we've got, very much a hookup culture, and we've got the divorce, 56,000 divorces in Australia last year. What's interesting is that the crude divorce rate hasn't changed much. It's still around 2.0 per 1,000 of the population. So it doesn't go up and down too much. It's pretty stable.
Is there a bit of marriage remorse going on sometimes, Bronte, do you think, afterwards, because of the way it was conducted?
Yeah, I think so. People, one of the things that I've found is that when a parent of one of the parties offers to pay for the whole lot, suddenly and the couple agrees to that, and suddenly they're produced, they get given the invitation list. Well, here's who's going to be coming. And so sometimes paying for it means that they'll take control of it as well. And it ends up not being the couple's kind of wedding, if you will. It ends up being the parent, which is... The parent
and all the parents' friends coming along with them.
And it's just beyond sad, and control is lost by the couple. And that causes... significant issues sometimes between couples. It doesn't happen often, but when it does, it's pretty and it's unwanted stuff that you just don't need on that day. And I think Amy's crystal clear, set your budget, be crystal clear about what that is and stick to it, and talk about all the bits and pieces rather than just one of the parties or the other taking over and organising the whole thing without the other person, being very much involved.
Sure.
I think that there must be couples who, having had that, $100,000 wedding or $70,000 wedding, look back, I don't know, sometime soon after that and think, we could have done some renovations to the house. We could have gone on 3 annual big holidays. We could have done this or that with that money. At the end of the day, after that, whatever sized event, they're no more or less married than the couple who got married in their front yard with 2 witnesses.
Yep. Just Bronte Price, a Melbourne-based marriage celebrant. Bronte, long may you prosper. And thanks for those who texted and called as well, particularly the tremendous stories of long marriages as well.
You've been listening to a Nightlife podcast. For more great conversations about the issues that impact you, as well as features on travel and food, head to the Nightlife webpage. You'll find it at abc.net.au/nightlife. You don't need to be a night owl to enjoy the nightlife.